really got to hold this thing. So, good evening. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I'm David McDonald, the president of the Downtown Neighborhood Association. And on behalf of the board of directors, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. And board of directors, we all want to stand up. I never introduced you, so I'll let you get a chance. The DNA's mission is to enhance the quality of residential life in the historic landmark district, protect Savannah's unique downtown environment, and advocate public policies which support these objectives. And as I've said before, I read that every month, but I want to reinforce that's what we do. Hopefully good. I want to thank our sponsors. You saw them on the slides earlier tonight for supporting us and what we do downtown. If you noticed or mentioned or read the newsletter last night, I said there was going to be a printed newsletter available today. Well, the printer didn't do it. It'll be available on Thursday of this week, supposedly. It was supposed to be done yesterday or this morning. So our ward captains will be getting them, and they'll be passing them out. There's also a QR code on some of these papers where you can download it if you want to read it before then. The printed newsletter is something historically the DNA has done for years. We got away from it about 10 years ago, and now we're trying to get back to an annual newsletter. Last year we did it at the end of the year. This year we're doing it at the beginning to talk about our accomplishments from last year and what our plans are for this year. So you get a good understanding of that. And then also, as you perhaps read in this week's newsletter, the DNA is celebrating its 50th anniversary as an organized. We say 50th as an organized, is a key word, neighborhood association, because as True Helms saw last year, where she found a document from 1967 that the DNA sent to the city objecting to fire trucks and emergency vehicles driving through the middle of the squares. So we've been fighting this for years. But it was, we think it was truly organized in 1974. And does anyone know who the first official president was? Jim Williams. And he also created the Holiday to Our Homes, which has its 48th anniversary. And when you get the newsletter, you'll see more about that. But to celebrate this achievement, the board decided to have a float in the 200th annual St. Patrick's Day Parade this year. If you are interested in riding on the float or walking, or can have up to 75 residents and members, we ask that you sign up on the DNA website. We hope to show attendees to the parade that people really do live downtown. So bring your children or your grandchildren and let's have some fun, or just bring a friend. So sign up, we'll let you know. We know we can swap people on and off the trolley once we hit Broughton Street because they have no road barriers.
Not trolley.
Or not the trolley, sorry. The float. Susan Grover, please don't mention the float, no trolley. The float. Thank you, Nancy Radke. What's that?
I already have the route of the parade, so you're okay.
I know. And I'm glad that we'll be getting people on and off. When we stop in the middle of the street, don't yell, Miss Broker.
Don't you worry.
And I failed to acknowledge Alderman Dietrich Leggett. You're here tonight. Anyone else here that I didn't introduce? Okay. We have a lot of candidates here. You probably saw them out there. We'll be probably having them every month between now and the primary in May and the general election in November. And candidates are more than welcome to socialize out there and talk to members, but I will not give them a chance to speak. I don't want to pick them. You make your own decisions in May and in November. Okay? Before we get into the police, I want to have Mary Sue McCarthy come up and talk about a few things.
So, the only one that has to turn it down to speak. The presentation, first of all, I am the chair of tourism and quality of life for the Downtown Neighborhood Association. Thank you, David, for introducing me.
I can see it.
You get the message. The presentation we made here in October regarding our concerns with over-tourism demonstrated the adverse effect of the number and noise disturbances from trolleys in the historic district. It was effective not only for our membership, but also for the trolley company operators and all who work in the tourism industry. Why was it so effective? Because it was based on data rather than opinions. How effective would it be if it were filled with, I think there are too many trolleys going past my house, or I think the trolley narration is way too loud. It doesn't work. It was effective because the presentation was based on hard data, gathered by a group of dedicated Green and Washington Square residents. As you may know, the trolley companies made their own presentation to us in December. What they said they were going to do to improve the situation and what they have done remains to be seen. They said they were developing technology with speakers that can only be heard inside the trolley. They said it would be ready to demonstrate to us in 6 to 8 weeks. It's been 11. They said they were going to alleviate the congestion and frequency in the most affected areas. Have they? No. Okay. Have they created new problems? We will only know the answer to these questions and many more regarding other forms of tourism by collecting more data. The walking tours, the bicycle tours, the pedicabs, the segways, the slow rides, the carriage tours. That's where all of you come in. We need your help in collecting the data. It will entail you observing and recording what you see and hear by counting, we can all count, and by taking photographs and videos. Gathering data is not a difficult chore, especially as our weather improves and the tourists again overpopulate our precious square mile. So you can sign up to volunteer a few hours of your counting, time, and photography talents in the lobby following this evening's presentation. Nancy Radke and I will be out there to sign you up. Or you can email me directly. My email address has been and will be in the DNA newsletter you receive at least twice a month. We really need people to count people getting on the trolleys at the visitor center, and those are set days and times. Again, it's not difficult. People who are photographing things that you see going on with all the other tours. As you're walking around town, take the videos, take the pictures. What are we looking for? Things like walking tours where the people are taking up the entire sidewalk. Take a picture of the whole thing, get closer with your video going, and say, you're blocking the sidewalk, excuse me. The reason we want the video is because sometimes the tour director will say, walk in the street, or too bad, or they'll curse. So we need that on video to show what's going on. We need photographs and video of people standing on private property, standing on the grass. Any place where people on tours are doing things they shouldn't be doing. And it's easy, you walk around town all the time, please help us out. So the data collection begins immediately and will continue until we have enough to demonstrate our concerns. We can work around your availability, days, evenings, weekdays, weekends. We need them all covered. If we want a better place to live, we all need to put a little time and effort into it. Please volunteer to assist us in restoring Savannah to all of us who live here. Thank you.
So a couple just brief updates from what Mary Sue was saying. The trolley companies have submitted new routes to the city, which they're required to do by December 31st. I don't think they're finalized yet, Susan.
I hope I can talk, not enough, I'll just say a few things. They have submitted new routes that are more regard a 3-month pilot with these new routes. We were going to announce that for March 1st and ask you all to help us, like Mary Sue said, pay attention to those trolleys and see how that's operating. We have seen the in-trolley sound.
Directional speakers.
The speakers is pretty amazing. And so I know they're putting together another showing, and they will reach out to you to make sure that you all get invited to come and listen.
Correct. So they're supposed to get with DNA and have as they go by your house, and Nancy, you volunteered your house as one of them. You're right on the screen. I will say, I don't know if that's a final solution. Each trolley will cost $12,000 to get the 2 directional speakers they're looking for. I don't see that large of investment from our tour companies doing that. So it's going to be years before that happens. We'll have to see if it works and what the timeline is for all of them to have it. So so we'll see. Any questions about the tour and the volunteering? The numbers help. When we showed one trolley every 4 minutes on Washington Square, it got their attention. And one of the trolley companies actually stopped going down there, so the numbers reduced immediately after that meeting. So they can do it, they just haven't chosen to do it yet. So we'll now hear from Captain Nowinski and Corporal Joshua Flynn. It appears that we will be losing Corporal Flynn. He will be going somewhere else. It's not a demotion, or it's a good thing. We'll provide an update on those as well as other crimes occurring in our community. I'll let you give the good news about both of those.
All right, I learned my mistake for last time. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, good. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide you an update. So I want to talk a little bit about format. So as you may or may not be aware, the Savannah Police Department has changed our approach to analyzing our crime data. For years and years and years, we have used a system called CompStat, which basically stands for Comparable Statistics. We look at our current statistics, we compare it to previous statistics from different reporting periods and times, and then we plan our strategies and stuff moving forward. We are now using a system called stratified policing, and it's new, so we kind of have a hybrid, a little bit of CompStat, a little bit of stratified policing. But as we transition, it changes the way that we talk about our data, about the crime trends and the patterns that are occurring, and it gives us a better plan of action because we're looking forward instead of constantly backwards at what has already happened. So the format tonight is going to be similar to what I would report to my major or the chief when we're talking about crime. So we always start with significant incidents. There were 2 significant incidents in the downtown area for the reporting period, and just for context, this goes from January 14th to February 10th. The new numbers will come out tomorrow for the last week. So this is for that time period. We had a shooting on Whitaker and Congress Street. I sent information out about that was a situation that stemmed from a altercation where somebody produced a firearm, a round was discharged, not clear if that was an intentional discharge or not, and a young lady was injured as a result. She was shot in the leg. She was not the intended target. I'm happy to report to you tonight that the suspect who was involved in that altercation, who was armed with that firearm, was identified and has been arrested. The other incident, as Mr. McDonald already pointed out, was we did have a homicide at Barnard and Bay Lane. What I can tell you about that situation is it was not related to anything taking place in downtown. It just so happened that that is where this transpired. A 19-year-old young man lost his life in that incident, and I'm happy to report to you again today that that suspect has already been identified and was arrested 2 days ago in Florida. We have a lot of information that we're following on in reference to that case. We anticipate more arrests and more productivity on the police side in reference to that. That is an ongoing issue. We're working with our partners, other jurisdictions, etc. So that one's a little bit more complex, but we have resolution in that particular incident. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your patterns and trends that we're seeing. The biggest pattern and trend that we're seeing currently in the downtown area is going to be entering autos, so car break-ins. Again, more than 50% of these incidents are unlocked vehicles, and we're getting high-dollar electronics, guns, loose change, things of that nature is what's being targeted. The only time that we're seeing entering autos where there is damage to the vehicle is if there's something that is of value or something that may be of value left in plain sight. So for instance, a bag, a backpack, a purse, anything that could contain a valuable might prompt somebody to break a window. But I want to take this opportunity to compliment the partnership and the relationship that we have with the DNA and throughout our community in the Northwest Precinct, because I want you to understand the value of that communication. It's not ignored, it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's helpful. Last week, me and Sabrina, we must have each other on speed email. Not really speed dial, but speed email. We probably sent 10 or 15 emails back and forth to each other. And that led to me having direct contact with some other residents and some other citizens in the downtown area. And what we did was we identified some entering autos that had not yet been reported, and we got those reported. We took the reports. In fact, I wrote the report myself. Sabrina sent me video of suspects who were involved in these entering autos, and before I'd even written a report, that video had been disseminated to my entire precinct. On February 14th, 2 days later, one of my officers was driving down the viaduct on Bay Street and saw 2 suspects that matched the description. We stopped them, had a short confrontation with them, got them in custody. Now, I cannot definitively say that these are the suspects who are involved in these cases because the video in and of itself is not of a high enough quality to make an identification. However, what I can tell you is one of them was armed with a pistol that was stolen from an unlocked car in December. All right. So we made progress in that case. The only other trend that we're seeing in the downtown area, and it's probably not going to affect the residential area so much, is electric scooter thefts. This is occurring on the outskirts, so MLK, Broughton Street, not really in the residential neighborhoods, but SCAD students who are securing their electric scooters to street signs. They're defeating those bike locks and they're taking the scooters. So we are working with our community partners, SCAD, to get information out to them to hopefully curtail some of those thefts. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is a trend that we're seeing that's associated with the entering autos, and that is key fobs. All right. I did a test. I personally did a test. I had this communication between Sabrina and this other member of the community who was certain, absolutely certain, that their vehicle was locked before it was entered. And even said, "Captain, I know it was locked because when I walk away from my car, my vehicle automatically locks. I hear it." So after I thought about it a little bit and thought about some of the other stuff that I'd studied and some articles that I'd come across, my question to him was, where do you secure your fob? All right. There is a chance that if you leave your fob in close enough proximity to your car when it's inside your house, the fob itself is inside your house, that somebody can still walk up to your car and pull the door handle and your car will unlock. So as a preventative measure, think about how close your fob is in proximity to where you park your car and where you store your fob. I was talking to somebody earlier who said, I bought some RFID pouches, and when I come in the house, I put my fob in an RFID pouch, so that way that cannot happen. There's also a trend that's being documented nationwide where there's a way to extend the signal between fobs and vehicles, so they're even more effective at distance. So it's something that you can test yourself and see if it's an issue or concern. I actually tested it with my own vehicle and found that where I was hanging my key on the key hook inside my own house, if my car is parked in the driveway, which it's not always, sometimes it's on the street, sometimes it's in the driveway. If it's parked in the driveway, my car will unlock if I pull on the door handle. So something that you can look into. The last thing I want to talk about is just, again, to emphasize the effectiveness of the communication that we have together and to ask that you continue to do that. So some directives have been put out to the precinct about traffic enforcement on the east side of Broad Street. A video was sent that had it's 5 minutes and 30 some seconds clips of all these vehicle violations. And I sent that out to my officers because sometimes we hear these complaints and a lot of times we feel like they may be more isolated than they really are. When we get videos like that, it really shows the impact that it has on somebody who's a resident or business owner in that area. And it drives it home more for us and makes us take it more personally. The last thing I want to mention about our partnership and how I use that information, nothing you send me goes ignored. Even if I don't respond right away, and sometimes I probably forget to respond to an email or two. I get about 150 a day. I'm not kidding. So, I don't know if I'm going to say it, Vicky's VC's, I don't know how it's pronounced, on Charlton Street. there's obviously an ongoing issue with that establishment. Because of all the communication I received and the way it drove home how impactful it was, from now on, when my officers respond to a complaint at that location, they will investigate it, they will document their findings, they will make an attempt to get compliance, and they will write a report. Normally, we would not write a report for a noise complaint, but we know how big of an issue it is for the community and the residents in that area, so we're gonna step up our response to it until we get a actual resolution to that problem. So I just wanted you to know that we take all of that seriously, we take appropriate action, and we're responsive. Last thing, I don't see, he's not doing this yet. So, last thing, on the trolley tour, I got corrected about a misstatement I made here in this room at our last meeting, and I just want to say thank you. All right, that is the kind of open and honest communication that we need to have. I was absolutely wrong. I went back and did my own research, figured out that I was wrong long before the trolley tour. It came up, I appreciate it, and that's the kind of constructive feedback that we need to be better. I've fixed that. In addition to the information that I sent out about the traffic enforcement on East Broughton, I sent out a list of city ordinances that all of our officers need to be familiar with that could help us be more effective in addressing some of those issues, specifically where a city ordinance has more constraints than state law. Because state law has a tendency to have a bigger window, right? Whereas some of our city ordinances are much more restrictive and allows us to use those to our advantage. So thank you for that, and hope to continue that open lines of communication, that good positive relationship that we've established.
Sorry, David. The two shootings that happened downtown, were they local individuals or people like bringing guns into our community visiting Savannah?
The one on Congress Street, the young lady who was shot, was local. I honestly do not know where the suspect resided. We did not arrest them locally, but I don't know if that's because they fled or that's actually where they're from. I do know that they were arrested in South Carolina, but I'll have to go back and look at that for you. The issue on Barnard and Bay is not a local issue. Again, that's just so happens that that's where that incident transpired. But they are not people who live in Savannah, but they're close enough that we are working additional cases. Thank y'all. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. As most of you already know, I'm your neighborhood resource officer, Corporal Joshua Flynn. Thank you. I met with several of the ward captains earlier in February in reference to a strong interest in starting a neighborhood watch program for the Downtown Neighborhood Association. Being that I just learned you all have been around 50 years, I feel like it's important to know that I'm assisting with establishing this. And just like the captain said, it helps build our relationship with you all. Obviously, participation is not mandatory when this is put in place, but it is strongly encouraged because those small bits of information, every set of eyes, every set of ears helps us with our investigations. It helps us be more effective. And that's where the transparency, the trust, and everything is built and becomes stronger. And also just your confidence in us as well through that. I know Mr. McDonald also spoke about me transitioning into another role. So we have selected, and I'm currently training another neighborhood resource officer. She's not here tonight due to illness. I know none of you want illness. So she stayed home today, but her name is Amanda Fonseca. She started with me earlier this month. And I'll be transitioning into a new position in the Savannah Impact Program. That program is a grant-funded initiative that we have. It focuses on dealing with folks that are in the criminal justice system, whether they've been to prison and have been put back into society or whether they are under sentence and have not gone to prison, also juveniles and our police athletic league. So in essence, I'll be doing what I'm doing now, but on a bigger scale. So I'll be more citywide, still available to you all, but it's just a different role. And of course, I don't know when that transition will happen, but this won't be the last time you all will see me, I'm sure. But I'll be back. I hope that I've been an asset to you all during my time here. And I appreciate all the support and help that you all have been to me during my tenure as the neighborhood resource officer.
Before I introduce our speakers this evening, I want to recognize Mayor Van Johnson. Thank you for coming. Okay, so the two speakers that we have this evening, Jennifer DeLong from the Chatham-Savannah Authority for the Homeless. She's spoken with us several times before. Last time you were here, she gave us the down low from everything that was going on right after the Truman encampment had been broken down, and we got to hear some of those details. And along with her for the first time is Vincent Pellegrini, who is the homeless liaison officer with the Savannah PD. So together, they're going to be giving us an update on the whole homeless scene. Jennifer?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you about what's happening in the homeless space here in our community. We are Chatham-Savannah Authority for the Homeless, and our organization does cover the entire county, so county in to county in. And one of the things that our organization, as the lead agency for our continuum of care, is charged with is identifying places where people are staying that is not meant for human habitation. We have a field team, a street outreach team, and thanks to the expansion investment from the city of Savannah for our street outreach team, we hired 3 more people in 2023. So a couple of things happened in 2023 that we hope advanced our services as a collective, because it's not up to one agency or one organization, but we truly all do communicate. No one's operating in silos. We have a homeless management information system data platform, and that's like all words thrown into one, that actually monitors how people are connecting with services throughout the continuum of care, how many people are able to get in shelter bed spaces, the bed space inventory count, which is updated every 24 hours, and reasons why some people may not choose to go into those shelter bed spaces. And so we are working together as a collective on helping ensure that people in our community who are unsheltered know how to get connected to services. And probably some of you are thinking, well, there are still unsheltered people, so you need to work harder, work faster, or do more. And we really are. It's really an inch by inch, not mile by mile situation. And so in 2023, 2 of the things that changed in our homeless care continuum was that we added additional street outreach services, but then we also had more transportation. So again, thanks to the city of Savannah's intentional investment, led by mayor and council, we were able to purchase another vehicle. So just in 2023, over 2,000 transports were made for people in the unsheltered spaces. Over 2,000 transports. And what that does is it allows people that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness throughout the community, specifically in the downtown city of Savannah area, get access to vital needs, right? So whether it's a meal service, whether it's a shower service, whether it's a laundry service, whether it's mental health care, we work directly with SPD, Officer Pellegrini's team, as well as the behavioral health unit, the behavioral crisis clinic, and we try to connect people to services. But I think it's always important to acknowledge that people can self-determine, right? And so as much as our street outreach team re-engages with people trying to build relationship and rapport over time, that individual, if they're not committing a crime of any kind, they get to choose what their next steps are. And that's really the whole point of effective street outreach, is building relationships. Like, we have people who are engaged with our street outreach team for over a year, and it takes a year of building trust and relationship before someone says, I'm willing to go to a shelter today. And that's okay, because our street outreach team is not going to stop going back. So even when someone says, hey, I'm not interested in what you have to offer, hey, I don't want to go to a shelter, hey, I don't want a bus ticket home to my Aunt Sally, even though Aunt Sally says, hey, come live with me, I really want you to come back home, it still takes relationship and rapport building. And that's the whole point of street outreach, and the way that we do effective street outreach in the community it really has been transformative to identify the gaps in services. So before 2023, we had 3 full-time people who were able to go out into the field and literally canvass county end to county end. That means from 204 and 95 up to the river, Bay Street, Broughton Street, River Street, downtown areas, all the squares, and we just simply did not have enough staff to connect with as many people as we really needed to try to connect with. And so in 2023, there were some intentional investments made by the city of Savannah to expand street outreach and open day centers. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but Union Mission has opened a really robust day center. And that day center activity gives our street outreach team the ability to transport someone who may not be willing to go to a shelter bed space, but is at least willing to go to that day center, get a hot meal, use the restroom facilities, charge their phone, and potentially get connected with services. Because the whole point in them going to the day center is not simply just to meet their basic human needs, but it's really to try to help us get them connected with services. So if there's a mental health need, if there's a recovery service need, if they want to fill out a COC housing application, they can go ahead and fill out that COC housing application to try to qualify for permanent supportive housing. But the whole point of those day centers is to try and get people connected to services. Outreach is try to get people into those day centers, try to get people connected with those available bed spaces throughout the community. And if you were ever curious, on any given night, at any given time, how many bed spaces are available here in Savannah? It's 438 bed spaces. Total, 438 bed spaces on any given night at any given time. And the update of those inventory is done every 24 hours. So every morning at 8 a.m., my team calls and says, bed space availability. I'm looking in the data platform. I see you have the following bed spaces available. Do you have the capacity to take 50 people tonight? If you do, we want to get those 50 people connected with those emergency bed spaces. But one of our most complex challenges is, while we have excellent shelter providers, there is very little outflow once people get into those emergency shelter bed spaces because of affordable housing and the ability for someone to stabilize while they're in emergency shelter and go from emergency shelter into an opportunity to an individual living environment, whether that's a rental, whether that's permanent supportive housing, whether that's a veteran's tiny house unit, whether that's a new cottage house that's being built for families and children exiting homelessness. And the other complex challenge in our community is for every 6 adult bed spaces, there's only 1 families and children bed space. So do that one more time. So for every 6 unattached adult bed spaces that's available at any given night, at any given time, there's only 1 bed space available for families and children. And so I say all that to say that we are really, as a community, both the county government, city government, our organization, nonprofit leaders, United Way of the Coastal Empire, we're all working together to identify how can we keep advancing and providing access to services that's most critical for people who are unsheltered in our community. Some of the reasons that people choose not to go into shelter bed spaces are they have a pet. We don't have pet-friendly shelters in our community. Sometimes it's they have a partner, and because we don't have family bed spaces, they can't stay with their partner, but they really want to stay with their partner because they're connected to their partner, and that helps them feel secure and safe, right? They're connected to their pet, they want to stay with their pet, but we don't have pet-friendly bed spaces. So this is just what's true. So I like to give all the facts about what's happening in the community, what's happening in the shelter bed space availability, but also the outflow from our shelters. So if a person's in the shelter and they're not considered chronically homeless, which, if you were ever wondering how many people in our shelters are really considered chronically homeless, there are less chronically homeless people than there are people who could self-resolve out of their shelter situation. But how does someone who can't afford to live in our community be able to afford a rental unit or be able to get into a house from a shelter bed space when they're trying to work and stay safe and go back to the shelter so they can get into the shelter, but also you only have 90 days in the shelter? There's lots of reasons, right? Lots of complexities, but our community really is doing a good job, and it's been an inch by inch, not mile by mile effort. Even in the coordinated entry system, the housing system, and having access to housing, over the last year, there are 29 new units of housing available for people exiting homelessness. And so next year, when we open the cottages at Dundee, there'll be 39 additional units for people exiting their homeless experience, and it'll be for families and children exiting. So there are lots of advancements being made, and we know we still have a lot of work to do. But thanks to some really intentional investment by city government and county government, we are now able to do more than we've ever been able to do as a collective. But I'm gonna turn the mic over to Vincent Pellegrini, and he's gonna talk, and then we're gonna give Q&A, because I bet we have some questions coming.
I'm Vincent Pellegrini. I'm the Homeless Liaison Officer for Downtown Savannah for the Savannah Police Department. So you might be wondering what the heck that is. So I'm going to try to give some insight into that a little bit this evening. This is my 4th year, going into my 4th year working in downtown Savannah. So I'm not coming from somewhere else or what have you. I know our community and been here as long as a lot of you all have. But I've been here for 12 hours a day for the last 4 years, so I know it quite a bit, and I love it, and I love serving it. And before this, I've done everything from institutional sales and industrial automation to running a commercial real estate brokerage. So I have a little bit of a diverse background. So as it says in my title, I'm a liaison between all the different contact points that may have contact with the homeless in our community. So that will end up looking like our behavioral health facilities, our behavioral health practitioners, clinicians, the Homeless Authority like Jen and her team. I'm working with her outreach team on a daily basis, trying to connect some of these individuals with resources and trying to move them forward in their life, whatever that looks like for them. And then also interfacing with all the nonprofits that exist in our space, in our ecosystem for the homeless. So that's places like the Dive, Savannah, and that's places like Union Mission that Jen referenced. And then also as far as a liaison within our department to the homeless and for our district attorney's office oftentimes too, interfacing with the homeless, et cetera. So what that kind of looks like practically is I'm on the street patrolling, looking for homeless related issues, and then trying to approach them with an outreach first platform. So we're going, as far as a police response, we're going to try to understand what they believe to be the cause of their homelessness, and then trying to create, with me having kind of a more in-depth understanding of how our systems work and what resources exist, trying to plug them into the systems and resources that can hopefully move them forward into having a more productive lifestyle. And then also when there are offenses, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? I'm the police, so I'm going to hold people's feet to the flames when there are, actual criminal offenses. And like I said, it is a complex system. Like there's things that you need to know if you're going to engage with our homeless system. So I can kind of coach them on how certain things work. Like you mentioned, you get the bed updated at 8 a.m. every morning. It's vitally important that if we're going to get somebody plugged in to emergency shelter services, that we get them there first thing in the morning, because it's a possibility that later on in the day, there aren't going to be any bed spaces available. So it's not always as simple as, oh, I want to try to get into a shelter. It's critically important that we get you there first thing in the morning if we're going to have a good possibility of doing that. So we also work off of a digital platform that kind of helps us be more efficient when we are engaging with these homeless citizens. So we're getting a better understanding of what they determine to be the reason for their homelessness, and then digging deep. That we don't always get that answer at the first contact, but we're again creating these relationships with these individuals. And we're eventually building enough trust to whether it's behavioral health or schizophrenia or drug addiction or family issues or whatever led to that person's homelessness, getting a deeper understanding of that. And then we're able to kind of come up with some goals for these individuals, and we're able to actually track these goals inside of our system. So I work on a 3-person team. We work almost exclusively with the homeless population and trying to address your quality of life issues that you're having with the homeless population. But we're able to go into that system when we have contact with this individual, and they can say, oh, Officer Pellegrini had contact with them on Tuesday. They were working on getting their social security cards so they can get their ID, so they can get employment. Where are they at with their social security card situation? And then what resources can we plug them in as far as vital document resources to try to move them forward into employment and then back into a better quality of life. And then I'm constantly doing the liaison thing, going out and meeting with intensive case managers for some of these individuals who are living in places not meant for human habitation in Savannah that are experiencing mental illness, chronically severe and persistent mental illness, and they may be AWOL from their case manager that's trying to get them their medication or what have you. And so we're plugging them back in with their case management so we can get them medicated and we get them back on the road to recovery. So we have seen a lot of success stories. I know a lot of times from your perspective, things with the homeless can be frustrating and what have you, but we do see success stories. Like just a couple weeks ago, I woke somebody up on Broughton Street and explained them. So the way our outreach process works is we're educating first, we're warning first, and then if the behavior persists, then the criminal things come associated with that. But I woke this individual up, I educated him a little bit on the process. We were able to get him plugged in with Jen's team. Jen's team got him into an emergency night shelter. Then from the emergency night shelter, he was being able to get plugged in with some employment with a car wash in Garden City. I happen to know the manager at that car wash, so I went with him with his application, vouched for him, and so now he's sleeping indoors, he's working, and he's moving forward towards a more productive life, and we're able to do those types of things. Also, in my role, I get an opportunity to work with our criminal investigation division whenever there is a major crime that's associated, that has something to do with the homeless population. So they're either the suspect or the victim. We've had great successes there too, where we've had a situation where somebody was the victim of a serious crime and they only knew of somebody who witnessed it by a nickname. And because we are out in the street on a daily basis engaging with these citizens, we knew that person's nickname. We were able to go, we know where they hang out. We're able to get with them. They were able to develop a suspect. We were able to then create a lineup. We were able to then use our resources for knowing where the victim, who is also homeless, hangs out, get her plugged in to make the identification, and now that person's gonna be brought to justice for a very serious crime and taken off of our streets, and the suspect was homeless as well. So just kind of multifaceted and dynamic what I get to do and what I'm blessed to do for the city, and hopefully that makes sense, and I kind of summed it up a little bit.
Businesses on Broughton Street and those that are businesses around Ellis Square. The aggressiveness. Is Monique here? Did you want to say something, Paul? Over there, middle. Monique is the owner of Kayak Cafe on Broughton Street, where I eat a couple times a month.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah. No, okay. Yeah, I think I've spoken to the captain and to you about this, and I know you were there last week. One of my managers told me. I mean, we've been there for 18 years, so we've seen the influx of what's been happening, and I think our concern goes more to why is there not foot patrolling from the police? There's just not. It seems to be very reactive and not proactive. And I understand, you know, the crimes and everything that's happening around the area. So I guess it comes more from that concern of you guys are always really great about responding whenever there's an issue, but how can there be more of a proactive approach and not waiting for these things to happen?
I think hopefully you'll start to see and recognize that you're seeing more of that go on. It's kind of, at the beginning of the year, there was one person doing what I do for the whole downtown area. Since we put a second person in that role, and now I'm the third person on that team. So we went from having one person basically running around with their hair on fire all day trying to put out the problems that were happening all around downtown, to now we're zoned off. We have more segregated responsibilities, and we have capacity to do that proactive patrol more to address the homeless population. So, address the criminality associated with the homeless population. So I hope that you'll see in the coming months, and when I'm here in future meetings, you'll say, we have noticed, we have seen you, we have seen a decrease, but that's all I have for you right now.
Transient versus resident-based, gender, and any other demographics that you follow, because my daughter and I wander around every day all over Savannah, downtown. And when I encounter a homeless person, which is usually in a square, I ask them, where did you come from? And the ones that are lucid tell me, oh, I came from, Atlanta or Philadelphia or whatever. So I'm wondering if there are people passing through that are homeless, or people that are residents, like families that really need some housing. And other support service?
No, that's a great question. And it's interesting because we just finished our point-in-time count on January the 25th. So on that night, at that time, we are, as an organization, as a community, are tasked with counting and identifying every unsheltered person, county in to county in, as well as counting individuals in emergency shelter spaces and transitional shelter spaces. And so on that night, at that time, approximately 175 people were identified as unsheltered here in Chatham-Savannah. Of those 175 people, less than 30% identified as only being transient. In other words, when the question on the survey tool is asked, are you from Savannah? How long have you been here? Have you been here a year or more? Only 30% said, I am not from Savannah. So it was about 30% of that 170 people at that time. We haven't disaggregated the data fully because we don't publicize that information just yet, but we will give a full comprehensive overlay of that. Of those individuals, we had more white males. Of those white males, more people identified as having an addiction and or co-occurrence of mental health challenges. So that's one of the difficult conversations that we, again, in the homeless space, homeless service providers, and as a collective, we have consistently is access to mental health care and recovery services, and really fast access. So when you're working with individuals, if someone says, hey, I want to go into a recovery bed space, but there's not a recovery bed space available for 3 months, 6 months, and if you don't have insurance, you're not getting to that recovery bed space, that's where some of our challenges are coming in. So basically, from our perspective, there are more people that are not transient, meaning that a year or more they have been here in Savannah. Is that helpful a little bit? Just a little bit? So no, I would 100% not say that. That means that, and that means that many of our shelters were already at capacity.
Okay.
So, and we do actually ask that question in our survey tool. Has a bed space been made available to you? If a bed space was available, would you consider going into that bed space? What's interesting though about that approximately 170 people that we interviewed, many said they would not choose to go to a shelter bed space. And so that's complicated. So our next question, because we are trying to dial in, what's your lived experience and what is it you're saying you need to come off the streets? They want a place where they can close a door and they can have their privacy. They want an SRO, they want a single resident occupancy unit available to them where if they had a pet, they could go in with their pet. If there's a person who's in active recovery or active addiction, they could have their own space. They would feel safe in their own space, et cetera, and so on. In our community, what we predominantly have available is congregate shelter bed spaces. And for some people who've experienced different traumas and circumstances in their life, they're never going to go into a congregate shelter bed space because they don't feel safe going into a congregate shelter bed space.
Okay, and then the other question is, so if I'm reading the tea leaves here, you're saying about 50% of the homeless people have some sort of mental illness or addiction, or would you say that percentage is higher?
From those interviewed during our point-in-time count, yes, more than 50% actually self-identified as having a co-occurrence of mental health and or addiction. Yes.
So when Jennifer talks about bed space, that's a critical piece of
Bring
information.
them to a shelter. That's, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We can, if they're
So
sleeping,
move on, go off.
yeah, if they're sleeping there, we
Yeah,
can.
move
yeah,
along.
Yeah, exactly.
So just a quick question, based on your last.
Man, that's a tough group.
What?
So housing first. So essentially, housing first in a nutshell would be a situation where it's not if you do, then we will. In other words, if you get clean, we'll give you a home. If you get a job, we'll give you a home. If you take your mental health medications for 6 months or more, we'll give you a home. It's literally, if there is a home available, we will give you that home. We will give you access to that home. And that's very oversimplification of housing first, but it's basically acknowledging that people deserve dignity, that people deserve to have access to a roof over their heads, clean water, clean bathroom facilities, making their choices for themselves. So.
I know you're talking about homeless or people who have been in a situation where they do not have a place to reside. I remember being at another DNA meeting where Beverly Willett showed us a video that was a documentary on people who were in our area who had other reasons why they were homeless or without shelter. And it all was not because they had mental health problems, and it all wasn't because that they were on drugs. in our church, we're at Asbury Memorial Church in Savannah. We're a part of a system called JUST, which is Justice Unite Savannah Together, which is not nonprofit organizations, but people who are in churches, synagogues, and bodies that are interested in things that are going on in our city, for homelessness, for people who can't afford housing. Each year, the members of their church come together and they identify several items that they believe are critical things that should be worked on. Last year and the year before, it had to do with affordable housing. So, what you said while you were up there was that you wanted to help a person move from homelessness or not having shelter to a place they can afford. There are people, residents, hardworking folks in Savannah who work 2 jobs or more who can't afford housing. They live 4 or 5 in a home, and they also have children. So what is the reality of saying that you're going to move a person from homelessness into one of the few homes that you have, or a family into one of the homes that you're going to build, when right now there are something like, and what they were trying to use as data was, statistically, the number of people would have a parent, 2 parents and a kid. There were not enough homes for them. So how do you put into your plan to help someone who doesn't have money, who don't have shelter, who don't have medical, who don't have documents, to be moved into a home that they can afford, when people who are working, have families, can't afford the housing that we have here? So that was a lot, but can you talk about that?
The most critical need in our community right now is housing and access to housing. So it doesn't matter how many people we can get into those emergency shelter bed spaces if we don't have housing opportunities and increased housing inventory access for those people in shelter bed spaces. We're just going to keep people in emergency shelters, and the cycle's going to continue on. So it is something that, as a collective, as a community, the city of Savannah, Chatham County, constant conversations and looking at creative ways to increase housing inventory access. So one of the examples that's an easy and quick example, because it is a good story, if you have time, it's just a good story. And I talk fast, and I'll put all these words in like really short phrasing. But for example, Veterans Tiny House Community, right? It was built with the intentionality, thanks to Ms. Cindy Kelly, in the room. So it started as an initiative that's going to focus on veterans needing to exit their homeless experience. And to date, it has served over 100 veterans who have all remained stably housed and or have moved on to other housing opportunities or are still living in the Veterans Tiny House Community. The rents there are $240 at a minimum, $240 a month, or at a maximum $400 a month, but it never exceeds $400 a month. And so opportunities like that, where someone is exiting their homeless experience and staying in a residence, we don't have limits. So there's no time limits on the Veterans Tiny House Community. If it takes them a year, great. If it takes them 3 years, okay. If it takes them 5 years, okay. If they decide that living in a tiny house is what is best for their life, that's their highest human potential, they want to live in that tiny house, they love that environment, they love that community, they love that neighborhood, they want to stay, they can stay. Okay, so we don't put time limits on it. And what it's allowing us to do is really, from a human-centered case management perspective, work with each head of household and go, what is it you aspire? And how can we help you reach those goals? That's wraparound services. It's not enough to give someone keys to a house. It's not enough to give someone keys to the house that's experienced the trauma of homelessness. That family, that head of household, that group of people often needs continuous opportunities to engage in social services and wraparound services. It's more than just those keys to that home. It's all the wraparound services that comes with it. And that's how our community is getting creative. The cottages at Dundee, again, it's 39 units in a caretaker's cottage. That can take 126 people out of emergency shelter bed spaces or transitional shelter bed spaces or hotel motel long-term living that a lot of families are now doing, those McKinney-Vento registered school children whose parents are having to live in hotel motels because they can't get affordable rental. Well, that now is going to give them an opportunity to stabilize in a home that is their own. The goal is not necessarily to stay in a tiny home forever. It's to help work with their case manager, engage with their case manager, build a relationship, and set goals that they choose for their life. Like, what is my next step, and how long is it going to take me to get there? And then we'll support them as they get there. So our community is definitely working on increasing housing inventory access, and affordable for a person exiting homelessness is different than the affordability conversation for a person who works at a job that's making $85,000 to $125,000 a year. That's completely different, right?
Working in a hotel,
Right,
less.
right. So that's what I'm saying. We do acknowledge that. So we're looking at that asset limited, income constrained, and employed families, children, and individuals in our community, which makes up over 40% of the households in our region. We do know that, and we are so focused on it, and I appreciate your sincere question. It was great.
Sure, yeah, it sounds like they're dealing with quite a dynamic problem at their business. I'll get with you offline after here, and I would love to get in contact with that person and be able to try to come up with some creative solutions and also talk to the business next door. But if somebody's threatening the life of somebody, we have terroristic threats. That would be a criminal offense that we would either be able to take them to jail for, or if the circumstances were deemed to be appropriate, we could divert that person against their will to get psychiatric evaluation and then treatment. So that's how that would play out when we responded.
For being here tonight, and also all of the service that you do to the community, for the community, and for the people that you are directly serving. I wanted to confirm the 175-ish number that you had said earlier. That was just from people that responded to the survey. Is that, or to the questioning? Is that right?
Yes, so about 90 days prior to the point in time count night, which was January 25th, our team, SPD, CCPD, and the Behavioral Health Unit is tasked with canvas mapping the entire community. And so we have a GIS map overlay that drops pins everywhere there's someone identified as living in places not meant for human habitation. So by the time we get to January 25th, our app, which is downloaded on all the phones, which is over 100 volunteers on one night at one time, they go out with this app tool, and it has a GIS map, and we canvas the community in that way. So we identified approximately 170, 175 people unsheltered on that night at that time.
Right, so that's not.
And places beyond Savannah. Let's say you keep doing a wonderful job and keeps getting fulfilled. You know, people pass words along and say, you know, Savannah's a great place. Good weather, they cover your beds if you need them, etc. Do you, at some point, are you able to say, well, we'd like to have you, but there's more room for you elsewhere? Is there other connection beyond Savannah?
Information system data platform. Every continuum of care in the state of Georgia participates in. And at CSAH, as the HMIS lead, we now have access to everyone else's data and information. So we can see when someone has connected to services in another community and now they suddenly end up in Savannah. And what my team has really gotten intentional about doing is going back to that original community, going back to that last case manager and saying, hey, why did you bus this person to Chatham, Savannah? And so then we'll start working with the client to say, is there a reunification opportunity with a family member for you? We sent 389 people home on Greyhound bus tickets to reunify them with family and friends in other communities in 2023. And that, we don't, Chatham Savannah Authority for the Homeless, because we're a quasi-government nonprofit, we don't fundraise, right? But we have generous citizens who will make contributions to our organization. And when generous citizens make contributions to our organization, we use them for Greyhound bus tickets. We use them for sub-zero sleeping bags when it's inclement weather and we need to help stand up an inclement weather bed space. We use it for hotel motels for the medically fragile. We oftentimes don't think about the medically fragile being discharged from local hospitals, but that happens every single week at my organization. I've had 2 people dropped off in body casts. So, I mean, there's very interesting things that happen in the unsheltered space. But we are very intentional as an organization now, as a community. If we can reunify people with their families, if there's someone else that loves them and wants to give them stabilized housing, our goal is stabilized housing.